Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Guru Deva, Guru Deva, Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Guru Deva, Guru Deva, Srila Guru Deva. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Good morning. Today we will be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, Creation, 11th canto, Krishna's return to Dwarka, and if I'm not mistaken, it's text 32. So let me see if it's possible for me to share the screen. Thank you, Prabhuji. All right. So, I'll read the verse and then open it up for anyone else to repeat. Before reading Bhagavatam, let's offer obeisances. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet. Nashta Prayeshwa Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Naishtiki Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridyantashto Bhadrani Vidunoti Suhritsatam. And the translation is as follows. It is I offer my obeisances to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer obeisances unto the Personality of Godhead, Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, super soul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses the desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee, who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Hare Krishna. Just in case there are any new confidential devotees to the Bhagavatam who don't know the translation, for their benefit or for them only, I'm giving the translations. I presume the majority of us know, because we've been confidential servants of the Bhagavatam for some time. Okay. First canto, text 32 of chapter 11. Dhamatma jair drishtibir antaratmana duranta bhava parire vire patim nirudham api asravadambu netrayor vilajatinam briguvarya vaiklavat tam atmajair drishtibir antaratmana duranta bhava parire rive patim nirudhamapi asravadambu netrayor vilajati-nam.
'Vilajatinam 'briguvarya vaiklavat. 'Tam atmajair drishtibir antaratmana duranta bhava parire rive patim nirudhamapi asravadambu netrayor vilajatinam 'briguvarya vaiklavat. 'Vilajatinam 'briguvarya vaiklavat. 'Tam atmajair drishtibir antaratmana duranta bhava parire rive patim nirudhamapi asravadambu netrayor vilajatinam 'briguvarya vaiklavat.
Would anyone else like to repeat the verse?
I can try, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Tam atmajairdishtibirantaratmana duranta bhava parirevirepatim niruddhamapyashavadambu netrayo vilajattinam raghuvarya vaiklavat. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to practice reading? Okay. Yes.
Tamatmaje tam atmaje drishtibirantaratmana duranta bhava parirevire patim niruddhamapi ashravadambu netrayor vilajatina briguvarya vaiklavar.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. And thanks for getting the meter. It's so nice to hear it when it's right. I've been trying to get it, but it's tough. Okay, I'll read the word for word now. Tam, him, the Lord. Atmajai, by the sons. Drishtibihi, by the sight. Antara atmana, by the innermost part of the heart. Duranta bhavaha, insuperable ecstasy, which is ecstasy that cannot be, like, it can't be outdone. Parire bire, embraced. This is a nice word because we know the word parikrama, urukrama. Who knows what urukrama means, or who wants to share with what urukrama means?
One who performs wonderful tasks, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji. And krama, like activities, and krami, if I'm not mistaken, is like walking. So parikrama is the one who walks around. And so pari, this word here, pari, is around, and bide, we presume, is like to enclose. It's a nice word for hugging. Pari de bide. It's a very it's a very colorful language, this Sanskrit. Patim, husband. Nirudham, choked up. Api, in spite of. Asravat, tears. Ambu, like drops of water. Nitrayo, from the eyes. Vilajatinam, of those situated in shyness. Brigu Varya, O chief of the Brigus. Vaiklavat, inadvertently or unintentionally. The translation and purport are given by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The insuperable ecstasy was so strong that the queens who were shy first embraced the Lord in the innermost recesses of their hearts. Then they embraced Him visually, and then they sent their sons to embrace Him, which is equal to personal embracing. But, O chief amongst the Brigus, though they tried to restrain their feelings, they inadvertently shed tears. Purport. Although, due to feminine shyness, there were many hindrances to embracing the dear husband, Lord Sri Krishna, the queens performed that act by seeing him, by putting him in the cores of their hearts, and by sending their sons to embrace him. Still, the act remained unfinished, and tears rolled down their cheeks despite all endeavors to check them. One directly embraces the husband by sending the son to embrace him because the son is developed as part of the mother's body. The embrace of the son is not exactly the embrace of husband and wife from the sexual point of view, but the embrace is satisfaction from the affectionate point of view. The embrace of the eyes is more effective in the conjugal relation, and thus, according to Srila Jiva Goswami, there's nothing wrong in such an exchange of feeling between husband and wife. Hare Krishna. Tamatmajir drishtibir antaratmana duranta bhava parire vire patim nirudamapi asravadam bunetrayor vilajatinam briguvarya vaiklavat. The insuperable ecstasy was so strong that the queens who were shy first embraced the Lord in the innermost recesses of their hearts. Then they embraced him visually, and then they sent their sons to embrace him, which is equal to personal embracing. But, O chief amongst the Brigus, though they tried to restrain their feelings, they inadvertently shed tears. So, Katanchana smrite yasmin duskaram sukaram bhavet vishmrite viparitam syat Sri Chaitanya namamitam. Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya vacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Om Gyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Things that are very difficult to do become easy if somehow one or other remembers Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But if one does not remember Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then even very easy things become extremely difficult to do. And to this Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I offer my obeisances. I offer my obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, who are exactly like desire trees, capable of satisfying the desires of all living entities. And I offer my obeisances to my spiritual master, who's opening my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge, despite my being born in the darkest ignorance. One day everyone will speak Sanskrit and Bengali, maybe. So we'll just be able to say these things once, or at least feel comfortable saying them once. Thank you, dear devotees, for giving me a chance to read today and to study this a little further. It's pleasing to Prabhupada that he did this for us. This was, though he's a pure devotee and the proper order of business is to serve the pure devotee. The pure devotee also engages in service and served us and people that we don't even know yet, who haven't even appeared, by staying up, sleeping little, and translating this Bhagavatam word for word and giving us the purports. So he appreciates. So now we get to serve him by meditating on what he had to say and what the Bhagavatam is about. So I heard yesterday in a class that the vilajatinam, of those situated in shyness. I don't know what the word in Hindi is, but that the word for shyness can sometimes mean shame, can sometimes mean like feeling shameful. Externally the symptom is similar, but that in this case it's shyness. So Prabhupada is talking about something pretty confidential. He's talking about the mood of Krishna's wives, the queens of Dwarka. It's hard to explain our emotions to people sometimes. So much misunderstanding comes from not being able to explain our emotions to people. And our emotions, without being insulting, they're not so multidimensional as the mood of souls that have developed pure love of God. So we don't want to misunderstand, but it's the understanding is made easier because the translation is coming through by a person who does understand these moods. Sometimes the question is raised of how can we understand things that are happening transcendental to us? I'm looking at the world we look at the world through tools, through like the tools of our eyes, which means that everything we see has to be acceptable to the eyes. If it's something that's not acceptable to the eyes, like x-rays or microwaves, we don't see it, even though they are facts. So that's the first limitation. It has to be acceptable to my eyes. If my eyes reject it, then I don't even know what's going on. I have no idea, but it's there. But and then it has to be acceptable to my, there has to be like a word for it. It's really hard for us to know what we're looking at if there's not necessarily a word for it, or if we don't know the word for it, we don't know, to explain. And then it should be acceptable to our mental faculties. And if you think it's kind of like a downward triangle. I mean, there's so much to see, and we already see very little. That means we have even less to think about now. If we can't even see that much, we have even less to think about. There's really so much going on. It has to be acceptable to our mind, and then even smaller than that is our intellect. However much we've been given the grace to develop our intellect, which is ultimately the ability to discern, what's most beneficial for us. And then finally, ultimately, really, like it's got to be agreeable to the false ego, to the identity of like, well, what's gonna set me forward in the world? Like that's really the most important knowledge. Whatever helps establish my position as very important in this world. But the world is constantly showing us that we're not, that the ego is not very important. And so that's the battle. The battle is trying to prove the whole world wrong. No, I'm very important, trust me. And now we're being asked to understand something that's beyond this, something that proves that like our false ego is like imaginary, that our intellect has not discerned properly, that our mind has been accepting and rejecting the wrong thing, and that our eyes so limited. So we got a lot, in one sense, we got a lot working against us, but we've got even more working for us, which is Prabhupada, who cares about us, Prabhupada, who dedicated his life really since 1922, even though maybe externally it wasn't manifesting, he said that from the first time that he met Bhaktisiddhanta, the instruction came into his heart and he accepted it. So 1922, 101 years ago, that long, Prabhupada's been thinking like, okay, how can I take this message? How can I take this message to the Western countries? So for 101 years, we've had, Prabhupada on our side. And from even before that, Bhaktisiddhanta has been thinking about, I heard once that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that I'm not here to build more temples, rather to establish within the heart of all living beings, the deity, Krishna. I would like to establish within the heart of all living beings, Krishna. And before that, his mother, Bhagavati Devi, it said that, when she was leaving this world, that it was her like last instruction to Bhaktisiddhanta to distribute, to write all of this knowledge in English and distribute them in books. And we know that Bhaktivinoda Thakur has been thinking about it. So, and then, if that weren't enough, we have the six Goswamis and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna himself, who really cares about our self-interest. He really does care about our personal self-interest. So much so that he's always trying to figure out clever ways to get the entities that have turned away from him to turn towards him again. And, it doesn't take much in a sense. Krishna just has to be himself. He just shows up in Vrindavan and he just shows himself. He just shows how he really is and what the exchanges with his friends are. And that's so captivating just walking through Dandakaranya as Sri Ram, he inspired so many yogis who are like meditating on, Paramama within the heart, or just meditating. So many yogis, they just saw him walking with Sri Sita, and they desired, like, oh my God, who could be like a better object of love than this Sri Ram? And because, Sri Ram only accepted, one partner in his manifest pastimes, he said, well, how can I have their dreams come true? So that as Krishna, he accepted, he accepted some as his confidential servants. We know that some of those sages were accepted as gopis in the next life. So to answer my rhetorical question of how are we going to answer how are we going to understand these transcendental things? It's by listening to somebody who does understand them. So Prabhupada's trying to explain, and Sutta Goswami is trying to explain something that's insuperable ecstasy. If we're fortunate, some of us are already feeling ecstasy. I don't include myself there, but like, if we're fortunate, we're already feeling it. But even then, even if we were, like, what would the insuperable ecstasy of someone else be? It's still like worth paying attention to. It's still understanding what moves the heart of someone else. That's how we show love. So now we're trying to understand ecstasy that can't be conquered. It can't be done. It can't go beyond. So we can, just like we might not know if water is very hot by just looking at it, by some symptoms of, like, if it's bubbling, we can see, oh, that's very hot. It's not ice water that bubbles. Boiling water bubbles. So what's happening within has external manifestations, and what's being described right now are these external manifestations of insuperable ecstasy. So first, they embrace the Lord in the innermost recesses of their hearts. And then they embraced him visually. And it's nice to consider that usually when we look, sometimes our eyes it's more like, it's like spreading, right? Like the eyes, like they kind of just look around, and everything's generally treated equally when we're looking around. But then the things that we focus on, it does seem like the rest of vision is given the second place, and it's that the object of our vision gets center stage. But now it's not only being given center stage, it's being embraced visually. And that's the Bhagavatam is described as being of all poetic works, it's the greatest. And it's hard to notice sometimes because so many lofty things are being spoken of that we forget that in the midst of all those lofty things, that like creativity and like beautiful language is still there, that's approximating what the soul's capable of. So embraced visually. And then they sent their sons to embrace him, which is equal to personal embracing. So Prabhupada says here, still the act remained unfinished. There's a verse that says, if somebody can serve Krishna, karmana manasa gira, with their activities, with their mind, and with their words, then even within this body, they are liberated. You know, Krishna is transcendental, and he's not limited by the activities of the material world of acting within the three modalities of goodness, passion, and ignorance. And when anything's connected to him, you know, his qualities rub off. And so a mind that's meditating on Krishna is no longer limited by its natural conditions of accepting and rejecting, you know, material things. That mind now has, you know, a different gamut of activities that it can perform. It can do different things. It can focus in a way that it couldn't before. You know, like everything in the world is always changing, or the configuration of the world is always changing. And so that makes meditation very difficult on any object of the world, because, you know, mostly everything that you're looking at is shifting. You have to find something like the blue of the sky to meditate on. But then if you're in Portland, you know, you're only going to be able to see the blue of the sky for so long before clouds come again. So you have to like really keep that image of blue in the sky. And then you have to fight with the fact that the mind is, you know, it's looking for something that's not so easy. You know, blue of the sky, it's kind of easy in a sense. It's like, what do you get from meditating on blue in the sky other than, you know, some peace? But if you can fix your mind on Krishna's lotus feet that are, you know, in his threefold bending position, and you can kind of, you know, see his heel up, and then, you know, the soles of his lotus feet, and then with his like where his toes bend, and his other foot that's fixed on the ground, and if you could imagine the tulsi leaves on his feet, and then the ground below that, the fortunate grass and dust beneath Krishna's lotus feet, and then possibly who's standing beside Krishna. Then, I mean, that doesn't end. Because then what's the person standing beside Krishna doing? You know, and then, you know, what else is happening in Vrindavan, and what time of day is it? And before that, you know, we can meditate on the lotus feet of the spiritual master, who's either, you know, sitting down chanting japa, or walking chanting japa, or going somewhere to going to another place to enlighten people on what Krishna is doing, but just fixed in general. The guru gets that name because they're fixed in service. Krishna is the absolute center of all existence, of all attractions. And the guru is the individual that's made their heart a residing place of that person. And so naturally that their heart is also, it's become a holy place. It's become a dham. And so that individual, that soul, the guru is unmovable in their activities as well. And so they're always fixed. The song of Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur guides us through a meditation of what are the activities of that person. They relish so much when other people are engaged in Hari Katha. And they're always trying to find creative ways to expand the service of Krishna. They're always engaged in cleaning the temple. Madhu Dwisha Prabhu said once that, like, you know, he gave the analogy, or he said that Prabhupada said that all of these temples are really my temples, but I can't go to every temple and clean every floor. You know, and so you must do that. And so Madhu Dwisha said that, you know, one of his meditations was when he would clean the temple floor, he would imagine that Prabhupada was next to him. He said, no, Prabhupada, don't worry, like, I'll clean this floor. So that's one way that we can meditate on it. Like, all of these ISKCON properties, they're Prabhupada's properties. Though it's an international society, you know, we're allowed to live in it because he built it. But that doesn't necessarily make us the owners. But, as servants, the servants get to live with the master in different rooms, but the servants get to live with the master, which is fine. So, karmana manasa gira, so the mind, we want to have the mind fixed like that. We want to have the mind like accepting that, like, how many other things are possible in service? How many other ways can I serve Krishna? And then in that way, we can use the fickleness of the mind to our advantage. The mind is so fickle and it always gets distracted. There are 9 processes of devotional service, and we can give all of those processes. It's like, all right, are you, tired of chanting? There's so many books to read. And if you're tired of that, Vandanam is actually a very nice one. Because if we're tired of a lot of services, or if we don't have taste for service, we can beg the devotees for service. So please, like I beg Jai Sachinandana, in a sense, and Parama Karuna Prabhu, if it's okay, I'd like to be able to read Bhagavatam again, because it's nice to be of service to the devotees. We can beg for taste, for chanting. We can ask Krishna for that. Please let me chant in a way that, if we can't cry for chanting, we can cry that we're not crying for chanting. And so Vandanam is very nice. And if we can't approach Krishna, through like Uttama Shloka, through prayers that other devotees have chanted, then we're allowed to pray to Krishna. And we can say, Krishna, and it can be something so simple as like, Krishna, they say that the authorities say that you're the supreme person, and that you can be approached, if somebody has no desires or all the desires in the world. So my heart. I won't tell you which category I'm in. You know my heart, but I'm approaching you now because, I've been given service by the devotees. And it's, and I can't, and it's so hard for me to do without any taste. But, if you would like, you can give me some attraction to this service so that I could keep doing it. So Vandanam is very nice. And Gita is very nice too. So that's words. And that's so important. It's so important to chant Hare Krishna. Sometimes it's hard for us to do things in temple settings and to know what all the protocols are, to know what all the rituals are that are external manifestations of love. But sometimes we feel like, well, I don't have that internal presence of love. It feels fake to do the external thing. But Prabhupada said, by doing that external thing, you will get the internal thing. Yeah. He said that to a devotee once. I'm forgetting his name. Hare Krishna. So we can use our words in chanting Hare. I mean, that's the most important of all activities. Ultimately, the external, shows of our love or the ritualistic activities. That's to ornament our love, but we develop the love by having a personal relationship with Krishna. And it's so nice that we're allowed to do that, that we're allowed to have that Hare Krishna, that we're allowed to have that personal relationship. In Prabhupada said once that the Bhagavatam, or that his purports are his ecstasies. And so much of what's happening in the Bhagavad Gita is Krishna's relating his relationship with Arjuna. And, sometimes we might feel left out, or we might feel like, well, everything else, the false ego might be like, well, nothing else is about me. Krishna's already got his devotees. He's already got his special people. He's already done the most wonderful things in the world. Like, where do I fit in? And where we fit in is with the chanting of the Hare Krishna. That's where we can personally, get some skin in the game. We can personally be there with Krishna and be like, this is me. This is how much I'm willing to focus on you. This is how much I'm willing to, make time for you and all that. And then karmana, so the activities. We can offer obeisances, and honestly, we can listen to pure devotees, like just listening to these classes that Prabhupada's left and listening to our spiritual teachers. That is an activity of the body. just listening submissively. And so much happens from that. So much happens from that. And so in the same way that our mind is, another dimensionality of activities is opened up by just meditating on Krishna, our words also. It's so much is opened up by giving our power of speech over to Krishna and in our body, giving our body to Krishna, things that the body is not capable of doing. For example, there's one of my god brothers who's been working on the farm. Like he's like a Vaishya. It's like for his whole body, like, they say that each of his fingers are like as big as hammers, because he has that body to just like, tear, open, like just push trees aside with his hand kind of thing, and just like work the farm and, grabbing fruits down to the trees. And he was born into that, and he's been doing that, and for years he's been just selling fruits in markets. But he's also the pujari at Vrajadam in Brazil, and he was being appreciated by his spiritual master. His spiritual master was saying that, like, when you look at the details of Radha Govinda and Gaura Nitai, you wonder, like, how is it possible that those small details, or like those small little braids, can be made around? Because the deities, they're not so big. But when you look at the deities, you wonder, like, what kind of hand could have added those small details to the deity? And his spiritual master said that, there's a limit to how much we can do. But once we begin interacting with the deities, we're taking shelter of a different energy. And that energy it can do a lot through us. It can do a lot through us. And so he noticed that even in those small details of taking care of the deities, we might be able to make a knot on the deity's clothing that we otherwise couldn't. We may be able to chant more than we thought we could. We may be able to sleep less than we thought necessary, or eat as much as necessary. And so that's happening. Imperceptibly, it's happening. That we are accepting the shelter of the divine energy. And it happens, Shraddha Sadhu Sangha. It happens, through the relationship that we have with the pure devotees of Krishna, that they're naturally so kind, that they're doing so many services that just by us, like, showing up, they'll eventually need us. So we should keep showing up. So this is let's see, 46. Something that's worth mentioning, and this is, not necessarily to any devotees here, because we likely all know this, but for posterity, it's worth mentioning that this is highly esoteric. This is profound and confidential. And it's worth giving credit where credit's due also. Srila Prabhupada did in fact give us everything. And it's not only in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam that confidential activities are mentioned. Here we have something highly elevated that's occurring. And if, for example, and I'll just open up this verse, which is in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela verse. So in the very beginning of the postgraduate study, Prabhupada said that the Chaitanya Charitamrita is the postgraduate study. So Bhagavatam is graduate. Like, once you've gotten, at least in theory, that you're not this body, then you're qualified to read this literature, which is all transcendental. And then the Chaitanya Charitamrita is, the most transcendental. So in the Adi Leela, this verse is found. Nirupadi premayanha tanha eiriti priti vishai sukhe ashrayera priti nija premanande Krishna sevananda bhade
Se anandira prati bhaktira haya mahakrode. The context is that pure love. This chapter is the confidential, the confidential reasons for the appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so this verse is describing the love of the gopis. And here's a specific qualification of the love of the gopis, which we know are very confidential servants of Lord Krishna. To say, whenever there is unselfish love, that is its style. The reservoir of love derives pleasure when the lovable object is pleased. When the pleasure of love interferes with the service of the Lord, the devotee becomes angry toward such ecstasy. So it's worth reading Prabhupada's purport here. As mentioned above, the gopis are the predominated lovers, and Sri Krishna is the predominator, the beloved. The love of the predominated nourishes the love of the predominator. The gopis had no desire for selfish enjoyment. Their feeling of happiness was indirect, for it was dependent on the pleasure of Krishna. Causeless love of God is always so. Such pure love is possible only when the predominated is made happy by the happiness of the predominator. Such unadulterated love is exemplified when the lover deprecates her happiness if it hinders her discharging her service. So here we see that, though they tried to restrain their feelings, they inadvertently shed tears. We should remember that the external, displays of love of God, they are automatic, as they say. They're not intentional. And I say this because, sometimes it's within our nature. It's within our nature, so long as we're conditioned beings, to care predominantly about the external and give, second or backseat interest to the internal. But Bhagavatam is different. Bhagavatam it's showing us the external here simply because we're not appreciating the internal yet. And so it's showing us these symptoms, but the symptoms are not for us to imitate. It's not for us to care about more than anything else, the external shows of love. I just say that because I want to make it a point as often as I can to make it clear that there's nothing that Prabhupada overlooked in his diagnosis of what we required. Prabhupada's course of treatment is it's perfect. And I say this because because other devotees have attained pure love of God following Srila Prabhupada's indications. And when we know this because we've seen the symptoms. Look at all the disciples of Prabhupada that have written books about Prabhupada, appreciating their spiritual master. The Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, the Chasing Rhinos with the Swami, Jamuna Devi, a life of unalloyed devotional service. All of the commentaries on Bhagavad Gita that have been done in the shelter of Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet. So pure love of God has been attained by following Srila Prabhupada's indication. There's nothing that he left out. So I feel like that's maybe a good place to leave. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. If I've overlooked something, there's time now to correct me, or if there's any comments that you'd like to share. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be of service. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for always bringing a new perspective, a new way of looking at the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. Really appreciate your thought and your realizations. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Dhanaraj Prabhu, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your realizations and for restarting the speaking. Thank you so much. I feel very, very happy and privileged to be in your association.
Likewise.
Your sense of your surrender mood and your humility is very inspiring and contagious. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Thanks for putting in a good word for me, Prabhuji. I appreciate you.
No, I didn't do anything.
Thank you, Prabhu, for speaking. I only caught the last half. As usual, your extreme sensitivity shows through in your commentary on this verse, which you rightfully indicated is showing a very deep rasa. And Srila Prabhupada's glory, that in the very beginning he's revealing something very private. And how do we as, how do I as a neophyte devotee take it, and it's difficult when you read these sorts of verses to appreciate the depth of such devotion, and you realize how far one has to go in spiritual life to achieve such love of God. Thank you once again. And I echo Prabhu's statement that it's very nice to have you back into the fold of those for whom Krishna is everything. And they manifest that by reading that which gives Krishna, which is Bhagavatam. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
So should we end at this point? Do you have anything else you want to add, Dhanraj Prabhu?
Thanks for accepting me into the fold. Thank you for accepting me into the fold. It's a good fold to be in.
Thank you for making the time. Okay, so today we have His Grace Rohini Priya Prabhu in 11:30 a.m. lecture at the temple. Please join if you all can. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, His Grace Dhanraj Prabhu ki jai. All glories to the Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Bye-bye.
Hare Hare.